other partners on. However, occasionally when it comes to more of the creative services or marketing type services, we do tend to work with some partners there. In our team, the business consulting team, we tend to engage on quite a range of management consulting issues, not always technology related, but obviously a lot of the time there's a digital flavor to what we do in the business consulting team. When I started at Waterstones, I was very happy to start in looking more closely at what Waterstones can do in the sustainability space, both ourselves as a business and for our clients. And so over the last 12 months, I've been taking the 300 or so people in the Waterstones organization on a journey of improving our own operations so that we become more sustainable, and in finding ways that we can work with our clients to help them operate more sustainably as well. So I'm going to start today by telling you a little bit about that journey. If you'll just bear with me while I recap, I suppose. I'm hoping what will be a familiar territory for a lot of you. I'm just going to spend 5 or 10 minutes at the start talking about the broader sustainability picture and the environment before moving on to the other topics that Mohammed mentioned in this, and you've read in the synopsis about the benefits of sustainability, the role of IT in driving sustainability efforts, a framework for how we can manage IT more sustainably, and the potential business value that we can unlock in IT by managing sustainability and IT together. But as I said, I've been on a bit of a journey in this space, and as for most of us, I think when we think of sustainability, we think of the environment, and with good reason. There are plenty of headlines and plenty of other, I guess, media prompts, if you like, that remind us about what's going on in the environment. Some of you may be familiar with this particular diagram. These are the climate stripes showing the global average temperatures over the last 200 years, alarmingly turning red in the last couple of decades, showing just how much global average temperatures have increased in recent years as a result of the industrial era. So much so that we're now starting to head into this dark red territory on the right-hand side of that particular diagram. But of course, it isn't just about the environment, sustainability. It's about people and profits, and finding a balance between our planet and these other two elements that we consider to be really important in order to maintain a balance of business, economy, the well-being of the people that are part of our businesses, and of course the planet, which supports all of that together. So if you were to do a bit of a word cloud on sustainability and the broader thinking around sustainability, it starts to get quite complex quite quickly. It actually starts to fill out, and spread across a lot of different topics. If you overlaid that, perhaps with some of these standards and frameworks that are around to manage sustainability in business, it starts to look a lot more complex again. And you might be well justified in asking a question like, why should IT even get involved in this space? And I'm going to start today's talk by talking about some of the drivers, and the most important being the idea that we started with, the environment. So recently at Waterstones, we had Russell Galt come and have a chat to us. He's from the head of policy and science at the Earthwatch Institute. He has a history of working with local governments around sustainable living, and he's also done work with the United Nations, and he's well placed to comment on the latest science around the environment. And also, Russell believes that the power of the commercial sector to transform change, to make transformative change, is immense. And he really feels that as business representatives, we're in a real driving position to really help make a difference to some of the issues that we're about to cover. Those issues, of course, being continued greenhouse gas output. Of course, it's one of the hottest topics in the sustainability space at the moment, and the UK government has reiterated their commitments to achieving net zero. And as you can see from this particular diagram, these charts here, we did see a dip during the tragic COVID event that we went through globally, but straight afterwards, we've skyrocketed straight back up to greenhouse emissions at levels we hadn't reached previously, which is somewhat alarming. It's potentially a knee-jerk reaction to what happened during COVID, and hopefully we will see a slowdown again. But certainly, with the regulation increasing as it is, we'd like to be. We would expect that some of these greenhouse gas emission outputs would start to drop again. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these slides. I do another presentation where we talk about the environmental impacts and the latest science in a lot more detail, but I really just wanted to recap some of these things as part of today's particular conversation. Obviously, global mean surface temperatures are also continuing to rise. We are now at 1.15 on average degrees C warmer than pre-industrial levels. I don't know if everyone was aware that last year was a La Nina year, meaning that we were getting some colder weather patterns as a result of some of the sea current changes, as I understand it, in the off the Southern American continent. But despite that, we will still be, 2023 will still be the 5th or 6th warmest year on record. And the last 8 years are likely to be the 8th warmest years on record, which is two alarming statements, I think, if you look at them together. And we should be sitting up and taking notice of some of these things. The resulting weather patterns from increasing global temperatures it will just really mean an increase in extreme weather events as well. And of course, no doubt that everyone's aware of continuing sea ice melt. So you can see there I've highlighted two regions on the map, the size of Mongolia and Egypt, which represent the amount of ice melt that we've seen in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, or thereabouts, and respectively over the last 20 or 30 years. So it is concerning just how much additional water is actually making its way into the oceans, and the effects that's going to have for sea level rise and so on. And finally, recently the WWF published a Living Planet report, and you can see there that over the last 50 years, we've had a dramatic increase in a lot of industrial activity. No, I don't think there's any surprises there. The worrying, I suppose, stat there is, of course, the wildlife being reduced by 69% over a 50-year period. And as sad as that is, from just a simple, I guess, aesthetic perspective, there are of course significant ecological impacts. We don't exist in a vacuum. We rely on our ecological system to work as a well-oiled machine. And of course, what we're going to be seeing increasingly over the coming years is the impacts of our decreased biodiversity. And again, it's something that we need to be mindful of. Amongst all of this bad news, there is good news, in that our governments are taking action, and the UK has been positioning itself to take action. So, at the very last global summits for COP27, and there's an equivalent for biodiversity recently as well. We saw the UK government recommit their to biodiversity, and so they made a commitment to halt and reverse biodiversity loss globally by 2030. Or at least they want to see an agreement to do that. They want to be seeing agreements to protect more of the ocean, and to be mobilizing more resources to fund a global effort, and to strengthen mechanisms for holding countries account for implementing the framework. Key themes, I suppose, from a lot of those summits were, I guess, addressing the issue of greenwashing that we're seeing from a lot of corporates. Obviously, ESG has become a hot topic in terms of setting up reporting frameworks for your environmental, social, and governance KPIs. But we want to make sure that those metrics that are being reported are in fact material and making a real difference to a lot of these issues. So it's at the very least, it's encouraging to see our government taking action. At Waterstones, we've been having a look at what we can do, as I said, both ourselves and with our clients. And we considered a sustainability maturity curve, which I'm presenting to you here now. Not unlike the cyber maturity curve that some of you may have seen. For those of you who are familiar with Waterstones and have done some work with us as done some work with our cyber consultants, we're proposing something similar in the sustainability space, that organisations perhaps need to consider where they sit on a curve like this. And Waterstones themselves are considering where we sit on this particular curve. We feel we're sitting somewhere between compliant and proactive at the moment, and we're looking obviously to progress further up there and adopt an integrated strategy at some time in the near future. But obviously, being pre-compliant means that you're actually flouting any regulations that might exist at the moment, and there are of course increasing regulations, and we're going to talk a little bit about those later. Compliant, you've hopefully done a greenhouse gas footprint. Perhaps you've understood what ISO standards might be relevant to you, and you've reacted to some of those prompts. Proactive means that you're actively looking at what's going to be coming down the pipeline. Perhaps you've set up an ESG strategy of your own and looking to make that as material as you can, ensuring that the metrics that you're reporting on are important to both yourselves and your stakeholders, and that you're actually starting to realise some operational savings. So that is something that we'll be talking about as part of today's webinar. Is just one of the key drivers and benefits, of course, of being sustainable is that you should, by definition, be seeing operational savings as a result of implementing some of these practices. And then, obviously, with an integrated strategy, you're looking to really enhance your company value proposition now through sustainability. And then at the very top level of the curve, there is making being a sustainable organisation your purpose and your passion. And of course, there are organisations out there that already do this. Perhaps the most obvious example that comes to mind is Patagonia, who have really made that their life's work and the heart of what the business is all about. Now that we've got some of those ideas out of the way, I'll say that I'm happy to take questions along the way. Thank you, Rob, for your comments. You're right. The human population increase is certainly a problem and contributing factor. I would encourage you to keep asking questions and feel free to put comments in the chat as we go. I will do my best to answer questions and address comments as they come up. If I notice them, and Mohammed, I might get you to prompt me if I haven't. And I would also just like to make it a little bit more interactive. So if you have a phone on you, I'd encourage you to grab that. We're going to do a quick Slido poll. I'd like to know from the attendees in the group today where you think your organisation might sit on this sustainability curve. Are you pre-compliant? Are you compliant? Proactive? Are you already an integrated strategy type business, or is it already your organisation's purpose and passion? So you could just use your phones to have a look at the questionnaire on this page. I'll give everyone a moment to scan the QR code, and we'll have a look at the results and see where everyone's sitting. I'm hoping that I'll get some really positive news and find a lot of you out there are in the integrated strategy space. Not a good start, the very first one in the pre-compliant space. How many attendees do we have today, Mohammed?
We've got 34 attendees.
Fabulous. Oh, that's very exciting that we've got someone, an organisation with purpose and passion, and also quite encouraging that half of you are sitting in that proactive space as well. Okay, we've got 12 votes in. If there are no more, perhaps we can move on. Yeah, I was going to say I'm surprised that we don't have anyone any more in the compliance space, which is where I actually feel our own organisation, Waterstones, is sitting at the moment, despite the fact we're very keen and on progressing further up that maturity curve. Okay, well let's move on. That's actually good to know that we have people representing organisations who are already doing quite a lot in this space, or I'm assuming are doing quite a lot in this space. Great to have you all on board. And for those whose organisations are not, hopefully can take away some ideas from today's webinar and take them back to your organisations and start them on that journey. You know, encourage them to go on that journey to becoming more sustainable. So we're going to talk about some of the benefits and drivers of sustainability next. And I think one of the reasons why I start this talk looking at the environment and some of the latest science on the environment is that, you know, it is one of the obvious key drivers to being sustainable. We don't exist in a vacuum. We don't run our businesses in isolation. We are part of a broader ecosystem and we are dependent on that ecosystem continuing to be there in the future for our businesses and for our own personal livelihood. You know, the environment is obviously one of the key benefits of operating more sustainably, to be thinking that the resources we're using and consuming in businesses are not actually infinite, that we need to be managing them a lot more carefully. But of course, there are a lot of other benefits to operating sustainability, cost savings being one of them. We've been talking about reduced energy consumption, waste management, and resource usage. And if the more efficiently we manage those sorts of things, the better our overall operational costs at the bottom line will look. Stakeholder expectations, of course, is another key benefit. Obviously, we've got customers who are interested in us in making sure that we are operating sustainably, and the products that they and services that they access through us have you know, not degraded the environment any further than what we have over the last 100 years. And so they're a key stakeholder. Obviously, if you're in an organization that requires financing, most financial organizations these days will want to assess your sustainable, your sustainable commitment and how sustainably you're operating. So there are just a couple of key stakeholders there, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. Brand reputation, again, related to consumers and what we're seeing in the marketplace in terms of consumer demand. Consumers are demanding that they're getting better, that they're buying from organisations with a better sustainable reputation. Enhanced innovation, obviously operating sustainably might mean some changes to the way you're doing things today. And so we start seeing more innovative cultures emerging in organisations who choose to adopt sustainable practices so they can start finding novel ways of solving sustainability problems. Increased employee engagement, obviously, you know, particularly with the younger generations coming through and taking up roles in some of the more established organisations. We're seeing a demand for those from that employee base for their employers to be more sustainable, and the more often an employee can demonstrate that they have a commitment to being sustainable and can demonstrate their sustainable practices, the more likely that employees will be engaged and enjoying their work experience. Risk management, sustainable practices go hand in hand with managing both long-term risk and in many cases some short-term risk. If you are looking after water quality, if you're looking after waste management, you're actually reducing some of the short-term risks and health impacts that poor sustainable practices may actually expose people and communities to. So risk management is a very key part of the benefits of sustainability. I've already talked about access to capital through finance stakeholders, and of course regulatory compliance. We've spoken about the UK government's increasing regulation, particularly on things like net zero reporting, and in the future there'll be more and more regulation being introduced, looking also to address things like biodiversity. I'm going to zero in on a couple of these as part of the next, as part of the next part of the webinar. We're going to be looking at stakeholder expectations, and we're going to be looking at cost savings in just a little bit more detail. So it was only about this time last year that I went to the Sustainability Live conference in London, and this lady here is sorry, her name's just escaped me for right now. I need to put it in the slide notes, but she is the procurement officer for the NHS. Oh, I'm sorry, there's some questions that have come through. I'll come back to those in just a moment. But what she spoke about at Sustainability Live, as I said, it was in April last year, was that all tenders as of April, 12 months ago, would include a minimum 10% weighting for net zero and social value, and that every year after that, we were going to see an increase in those procurement requirements from the NHS. Now, as you can imagine, one of the largest procurers in the UK, setting out requirements like that for their various suppliers has a ripple effect throughout the commercial environment, because for you to demonstrate sustainability in your own practices, quite often you need to be demonstrating your selection of suppliers who are also committed to sustainability. I don't know about your own organisations, but at Watersons, we've already had half a dozen of our own clients ask us about our sustainable practices and our commitment to sustainable operations, and we've begun asking our suppliers the same questions. So stakeholder expectations is quite a significant benefit in the current market. If you haven't been asked already, you probably will be asked in the very near future about your organisation's commitment to sustainable practices, to carbon, to reducing your carbon footprint, and so on. So this is a very clear and immediate benefit, just simply to remain in the commercial supply chain. Now, I did just say there were a couple of questions. So how do you think we can, as IT professionals, drive change towards sustainability within our companies? Okay, that's a very good question. I will be talking about that a little. I think though that where you're asking, what you're asking for there, Claire, is how we can ensure, or how we can perhaps raise the profile of sustainability and sustainability issues internally. And it's, to be honest, it's not easy. I think getting people in to talk about, like Russell, for instance, Russell Galt, to come in and talk about some of the environmental science and what's going on in the environment, just keeps that fresh in people's mind. I think that's a really good thing to do, to be trying to get guest speakers in and inviting people along to webinars like this to keep the issue fresh in people's minds. The other thing to do is to actually start changing your own behaviour within your own teams and your own departments. If as a team you start reporting on some of your own behaviours and how you're changing your own behaviours within your own teams and departments, and how you're operating more sustainably, that will have a ripple effect outwards throughout the organisation, where other people will start wanting to do the same. So it's about two things. It's about keeping the message fresh and about changing your behaviours. Do you think more needs to be done on employee engagement? Potentially. This is not an area of expertise for myself. I do know there are people, there are organisations out there who are doing educational pieces for employees, not just on sustainability broadly and how that affects employee engagement, but also just improving things like vocabulary. We had a presentation in our sustainability forum recently from an organisation called Venture Zero, who do carbon vocabulary training, and also the link, and to discuss also the links to employee mental health. So it was a great presentation from themselves, and so I do know that these sorts of suppliers exist out there who can help raise the profile of sustainability with employees and improve employee engagement. So we've talked about stakeholder expectations, and the other thing I said we'd talk about is cost savings. So McKinsey recently, well, not so recently, it was what is it, nearly 10 years ago now, I guess published that that sustainability issues, or addressing sustainability issues, can see improvements in earnings as high as 25 to 70%, and obviously that's perhaps not well in IT organisations where our carbon footprints are not so as significant, or perhaps our environmental impact is not as significant. I would imagine that those sorts of savings and benefit and financial benefits are probably more the domain of manufacturing and construction type industry. However, we will have a look at a couple of case studies in a moment where IT companies have seen some significant savings by implementing sustainable operations themselves. This has also been backed up, of course, by by Harvard Business Review, estimating that companies who invest in sustainable practice see returns of between 27 to 80% on their low carbon investments, which is fantastic. I've just seen the question to overpopulation and Jasmine. I wish I could answer that. I don't know if anyone out there has got an answer for Jasmine on how we can adopt to cope with overpopulation. Unfortunately, that's not my area of expertise, but it is something that we do need to solve. That's for sure. Right. Looking at some IT companies and their focus on sustainability. So Google is a great example. Google are probably one of the leaders in terms of the tech giants in their sustainable behaviors and the changes they've made to operating sustainably. They've got a huge focus on renewable energy, on energy efficient data centers, and of course, Google's data centers are enormous. And as well as putting in place circular economy initiatives. They've achieved 100% renewable energy for their global operations from 2017, which is quite remarkable. And you'll see why in a minute when I share their energy consumption. Microsoft is another. So Microsoft committed to becoming carbon negative by 2030. They actually are committed to removing all the carbon it's ever emitted by 2050. And so they are investing in renewable energy and in energy efficient data centers and in carbon renewal technologies. And they've also made fantastic progress and seen exceptional benefits from making these operational changes. In fact, both organizations are reporting approximately 10% reduction in energy costs. Now you might think, well, that's not a lot, especially in terms of reduction. However, when you consider that I think these organizations are consuming around about 15,000 gigawatt hours of energy per annum, and that a gigawatt hour I think is around about $5 US. I think it comes out at approximately $75 million US that they've realized in savings just from simply improving their own operations. And I think that it goes to show that regardless of the fact that you may not be a construction company and you may not be, in manufacturing organizations where perhaps the environmental footprint of what you're doing is more significant, IT can still see a reduction in impact on the environment and translate that into operational savings by implementing more sustainable practices in your operations. Right, so that's the benefits of sustainability, both for us as a species in the environment, for us in business in terms of operational savings, and how IT in particular can see some of those benefits. We actually go about driving that in the business. What things can IT do to start affecting some of that change? There are really 8 things which I'm saying that are really key for IT in making a difference in being sustainable and driving business value. At the top of the list is data collection and analysis. And while there's an immediate benefit to data collection and analysis, we'll touch on later the longer term benefits of data collection and analysis. So IT systems can help businesses collect, analyze, and monitor data related to environmental and social performance. That data has an immediate benefit of being able to identify areas for improvement, to measure progress, and to inform decision making. Obviously, there's a compliance component as well with that data, using the data to substantiate reporting and ESG reporting metrics to stakeholders and to regulators. Secondly, is investing in energy efficient technology. So it doesn't matter the size of your IT department, but you can always be reviewing your procurement policies to implement energy efficient hardware and software solutions, looking at virtualization, looking at cloud computing options, looking at server optimization to reduce your energy consumption. And of course, as we've discussed earlier, with the examples of Google and Microsoft, that will also translate into lowering your operational costs. You can be supporting smart building and facility management. So obviously the Internet of Things, using devices and sensors and automation. You can optimize energy usage, water consumption and waste management in buildings and facilities. And this will result in the reduced environmental impact and again, in reduced cost savings if we can do that efficiently. Improving remote work and collaboration. Now this is a tricky one. It's hard to get the balance right, and thing which we're discussing at Waterson's even still today. So IT can enable remote work and virtual collaboration, and that'll reduce the cost of overhead. But obviously, what does it increase? It increases the cost of energy at home, and that needs to be really accounted for when you start doing carbon footprinting. You can't negate the additional energy that's been consumed at home for remote working. So what we have started to consider, and which we haven't progressed yet, but I do believe it'll be something which we'll do something about in the near future, is looking at how we can better use the office space that we have left. Yes, we've got a lot more people working from home these days post-COVID, and less people in the office, but that, I guess, raises an opportunity to perhaps co-locate other businesses in the same building as us, perhaps sublet some of the space that we have, so that we're getting more efficiency out of the office space that is left over, and that overall should translate into a reduced energy consumption per head. Supply chain optimization is another great example. So IT solutions can be employed to streamline and optimize supply chains to find the waste in those supply chains. It can improve resource efficiency and reduce transport-related emissions. We can be looking at product and service innovation, again, something we touched on earlier. IT can facilitate the development of sustainable products and services, providing platforms and tools for research, design, prototyping, ultimately helping businesses create solutions and eco-friendly offerings, both to improve their operations and to appeal to their markets, to their customers. Reporting and disclosure, obvious one. This is a space which IT has always been a key player, and it doesn't matter whether it's sustainable compliance or any other sort of compliance. IT is always, at the heart of ensuring that data is collected, collated, and presented appropriately for regulation and disclosure. So IT systems are used to automate and simplify the reporting of sustainability metrics, making it easier for businesses to disclose their environmental and social performance to stakeholders. Employee engagement and training, coming back to that point there, IT can support employee engagement and sustainability initiatives through communication tools, e-learning platforms, and gamification. So that is probably a better answer to my answer earlier around employee engagement. I have seen a lot of gamification tools emerging in the marketplace recently. We haven't adopted one yet ourselves at Waterson's, but people who are sharing their employees' individual carbon footprint and carbon reduction initiatives, taking the train when they could have flown, or perhaps walking when they could have driven. So and turning that into a competitive kind of game is obviously a key part of that engagement process. And so yeah, there are a lot of tools appearing on the market now to do that kind of thing, fostering a culture of sustainability within our organizations. So with those sorts of activities in mind, again, I'd like to just focus in on a couple and look at them in a little bit more detail. Firstly, we'll have a bit of a look at data collection and analysis, and something that Waterson's is doing with our clients today in that space, and what I think it means for us now, immediately, both at Waterson's and for our client, and what I think it might mean for us in the future as well. I think there's a real opportunity in this particular activity. The other thing we'll look at is product and service innovation, and how those two things work together. But before I do, I'm going to open the polls again. So please get your phones back out. I'd like to know what your IT departments, and I'm assuming that everyone here is representing an IT department in some capacity. I'd like to know which of these activities your IT department is taking on and contributing to, and potentially driving some business value within your own organization. So let's hear from the crowd in terms of what it is you're doing or not doing. Excellent. You can see some investment in energy efficient technology, but most of it, perhaps not surprisingly, is around data collection and analysis and remote work and collaboration. It's an interesting one, that remote work and collaboration. It's certainly, IT is certainly facilitating that. I'd be very curious to know, and perhaps this is a separate conversation, but just how much of that remote work and collaboration is facilitating other energy saving initiatives like as subletting office space to share those energy costs for offices that are still left on, but perhaps I don't know if anyone would like to share what their organisation is doing in that space for remote work and collaboration, but I'd be very keen to understand that a little bit more. Yes, also not surprised though that data collection and analysis is the second highest response. I'm really pleased to see there's a lot of innovation and smart buildings kind of activity going on. And also not necessarily surprised that supply chain optimization and employee engagement are two of the bottom categories at this point. Supply chain still being the hardest area to tackle in the sustainability operations space. It's complex. If anyone's tried to do their scope 3 carbon footprint baselining, they'll know just how challenging that can be to reaching the supply chain and measure that effectively. Okay, well, we'll move on and talk a little bit more about innovation, data and data collection, and just where I see IT going in that space in the near future, and the kind of value add that IT can create for sustainable operations. This particular slide is a view of Waterston's own materiality assessment. So for those who aren't familiar with the idea of a materiality assessment, the objective behind this activity is to identify a number of disclosure topics or topics that fit within that environment or social or governance space that you may want to improve your transparency in terms of reporting on with your stakeholders. You might pick as part of the assessment, look at other industries in your sector and what they're reporting on. You might look at other frameworks like potentially SASB or the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and look at disclosure topics within those frameworks that you think are relevant to you or that are of interest to you. And you might simply just ask your employees and your other stakeholders in terms of shareholders or lenders, what is important to them. And then once you have a handful of potential disclosure topics that you want to assess, you then run a survey to determine just how important those things are with your stakeholders and just how much your stakeholders think you're capable of influencing the outcome of those disclosure topics. So you can see here for Waterston's, Waterston's being a very people-oriented consultancy, it's not surprising to me that we have communities and social, diverse and inclusive workforce health and safety, all being very key topics for us and our stakeholders to disclose on, and I guess talking about how well we're doing those topics. However, perhaps other topics which we could be doing more in and doing a better job of are around the business resilience and risk space and the innovation space. So it's good to ask your stakeholders. It's good to conduct these materiality assessments to find out. And innovation, of course, being something which in the IT space, as we've already talked about, is something where we can really add value. So we are looking now to how we can be doing more in the innovation space in the coming years to see how we can be improving the sustainable operations of our clients through innovative solutions. Not so innovative, but I'm hoping it will be in the near future. And again, my apologies for this slide. It's very busy and very bright, I know. It'll be burnt into your retinas for a long time after this particular talk. But this is the process which we've been using for our for some of our clients to take them on a carbon accounting journey. And of course, when I see something like this, and I see that there's a series of steps that you can go through, and that you're going to have to go through regularly. In this case, probably annually. In some cases, people are reporting on their carbon emissions quarterly. But whenever it's regular, whenever there's a lot of work involved, and in many cases behind each of these steps, there's a lot of work involved in collating data. I see an opportunity for automation. So, I think that when process automation is one of the big opportunities for IT to really deliver value in the sustainability space for our organizations. We can be taking processes like this and finding ways to take the manual overhead out of it, to streamline it, and even though carbon accounting itself may not be an incredibly manually intensive process, that in principle is such a good way for us to become more sustainable and to reduce the impact of heavy resource consumption by making sure that IT take on a lot of the overheads involved with something which should be quite simple in terms of collating data and reporting. We then take the output of processes like that and we start collecting the data in terms of where your emissions are coming from across the organization. And of course, the opportunity here is very similar. We can start doing a lot of data aggregation. As we get more and more of assessments done and carbon footprints done, we can start reporting to our clients on where they're sitting in terms of industry sector aggregates and how they're performing against some of their peers and what their peers, in fact, might actually be doing to start addressing that. So I think sustainability, unlike a lot of other business initiatives, is a truly collaborative exercise. We do want to be learning from each other. We do want to be, in effect, linking arms and addressing this together. It is an issue that affects everyone equally. The competitive aspect of business and the advantage you might want to get over your competitors in the sustainability space is greatly reduced. And the more we can be learning from each other and aggregating data to take best practices and lessons learned forward across multiple organizations is a big opportunity that IT can help address. And finally, once you've assessed the data and you've come up with your recommendations and you've decided, which of those you want to prioritize and effort, you can then be looking at how you can reduce carbon footprints moving forward and coming up with better plans. And again, I think with the event recently, and of course, I've no doubt that many of you may be going to the same place I am, looking at models like GPT and the recent emergence of AI and what it can do for us. I see the collation of this kind of data in large data sets, really facilitating machine learning and providing AI-assisted advisory services in terms of how we can be making better decisions about reducing not just carbon, but other environmental metrics and our impact on the environment moving forward. So this is where I see IT being in the future for sustainability. That the data that we collect today will be tomorrow's fodder for machine learning and AI-assisted advice and better initiatives and timed in the right way and better suited to the organizations that are asking the questions about what they can do. The last thing I'd like to look at, as well as looking at the innovation and the data collation side of things, the last thing I'd like to look at is how we can be managing IT better on its own. So we have recently developed a framework at Waterstones where we've looked at the pillars of sustainability: people, planet, profit, and how that might overlay on other IT operational frameworks like ITIL. So, and how you might conduct an audit or an assessment of an IT operation with both those lenses simultaneously. So we have used those two ideas and those two frameworks to create what we're calling the Sustainable IT Essentials. Again, modeled after some of the work that we do in the cyberspace. For anyone familiar with Cyber Essentials and the format of those frameworks, we developed a series of questions to assess how your IT department is currently performing in the sustainable in terms of sustainable practice. And we've broken that down here, as you can see, by ITIL phase on the left. And we've got a series of questions that you ask to determine, how mature your own organization is at sustainability, how mature IT is in terms of aligning with your organization's sustainable practices, and then right through the service design, service operation, and transition phases of ITIL. We are actually going to be taking that that work and reassessing that against perhaps some of the more standard ISO frameworks. We put this in front of a client recently and got their feedback, and that was their response is that they have a more of an ISO operational framework in terms of how they manage their IT, and they asked if we could have a look at reworking this this framework from an ISO perspective. So we're going to be producing that in the near future also. And if anyone's interested in going through this assessment, I'm still interested in talking to you and spending some time with you on it. We are looking for people who are willing to be guinea pigs in this space to understand how their IT department might shape up against others in terms of this particular assessment framework. Okay, so just to summarise, I feel like I've gone on a bit longer than what I intended, Mohammed. My apologies, but if there were 3 points that I'd like to probably recap from today's webinar, it would be these. There are some very clear drivers for business and IT to operate sustainably, and we touched on just briefly things like improved brand reputation, enhanced innovation, increased employee engagement, risk management, access to capital, regulatory compliance. But the big ones, I think, from my perspective, were environmental preservation that we kind of did a deep dive on at the start, cost savings, and stakeholder expectations. The second thing that I'd like you to take away from today's webinar is that sustainable IT can drive business value in a number of ways. And again, we touched on quite a lot of those. We touched on energy efficient technology, smart buildings and facility management. We touched on remote work and collaboration, supply chain optimization, reporting and disclosure, employee engagement and training, and customer engagement, and circular economy solutions as well. But the ones which we did a bit of a deeper dive on, and which I feel we can be doing a lot with right now, is the data collection and analysis activities, as well as our product and service innovation activities. Finally, the last point to take away is that there are new frameworks emerging that can support improvements in IT operations in the way that we manage IT sustainably. And the example that I put forward obviously was our own IT-oriented sustainable IT essentials. So that's the webinar. I'm happy to take questions from anyone if you'd like to ask anything else. We've still got 7 minutes left, and Mohammed, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to cover off as part of the session today.
No, thank you, Mike. That was very informative. Yeah, I think we can just open up to questions. Yeah, you can unmute yourself if you want to, or put it on the chat. One from me, Mike. If one has not actually thought about sustainable IT, where is a good place to start?
Well, I could potentially suggest our own ITIL assessment, and at the very least, conducting a gap assessment of your current operations against a framework like that. It'll certainly give you a lot of ideas in terms of what it takes to manage IT in a sustainable way, or at least our assessment and our opinion of what it takes to manage IT in a sustainable way. Typically, though, the organizations that we're dealing with aren't actually starting with IT. Most of them are business-driven initiatives, organizations that are wanting to respond to regulation around providing carbon footprinting reporting. So that's usually a starting point for most organizations, is to start that carbon footprinting piece of work. Alternatively, organizations are looking to establish ESG reporting frameworks and conducting materiality assessments, similar to the diagram I showed you earlier as well.
Okay, thank you. Got a question from, we got 2 questions there, Mike.
Sure, Greg, your question is, are you developing this framework against other frameworks and methodologies? In terms of the Sustainable IT Essentials framework, yes, only ISO at this point in time. I'm happy to take suggestions. If you think there are other frameworks you'd like to see an assessment framework like that organised around, Obviously, we have some familiarity with both ITIL and ISO, which is why we've chosen those. But we're happy to take guidance from anyone on what they would like to on the kind of methodologies they use within their own operations. David, are you working with clients to reduce carbon footprints in their own IT workloads? Not directly yet, David. No. At the moment, we are mostly working with our business clients just around reducing carbon footprints of their entire operations. I would like to start specializing more, and it would make sense, obviously, as an IT and business consultancy, to specialize more in IT workload in terms of things like cloud versus on-prem and so on. We certainly have the skills in-house to do that. We just need to be maturing our own service offering, I think, before we start to do that. But we're well positioned to start doing that in the near future.
And in terms of bringing awareness, Mike, to a team, where do you think we should sort of be at in terms of bringing this into a topic and discussion?
How do you introduce sustainability into the broader organization, from an IT perspective? Is that the
yes?
Is that
through IT, correct?
Yeah. So I'm not sure I've got a great answer for that. So I previously pointed to the likes of guest speakers like Russell Galt to raise awareness about environmental impacts. I always think that's a great discussion topic to be introducing to organisations to be mindful that they don't exist in isolation, that their actions as a business do have external ramifications and long-term ramifications, and they're ramifications we need to be thinking about and addressing. However, the other thing you can do is to start making changes internally yourself, even without the rest of the business putting sustainable practice into place. There's no reason why, as an IT department, you can't be looking at ways to report on the carbon footprint of the decisions you're making. That is something which we've just started doing recently, is to be putting carbon footprint assessments into some of our proposals, not all yet, but into some of our proposals, so that our own clients understand that we are being mindful of the work which we are doing, and the carbon footprint which we create when we undertake that work, and how we can be reducing that moving forward. So that is the kind of thing you could be doing, is when you start perhaps putting proposals together, to be considering carbon footprinting as part of those proposals, and what it means for the organisation to undertake pieces of work.
We got a question from John.
How could IT be carbon negative when consuming energy without an option on suppliers and usage by business? John, I'm not going to profess to be an expert in energy consumption for IT. I do believe that there are an increasing number of renewable energy resources available to IT. I don't believe there is even when the likes of Google and Microsoft are reporting being completely carbon neutral, I approach that with some skepticism, particularly around offsetting and how much offsetting they're doing as part of that process, which of course is not completely, I guess, problematic to be participating in offsetting, but of course it's not the best outcome. We want to be reducing carbon emissions entirely and getting away from carbon offsetting. However, I'm inclined to agree, and I'm guessing this is where your question is going, John, that it's probably not realistic right now to be completely carbon negative without some sort of offsetting claim.
Right. Mike, thank you for that very interesting, informative talk. I think there's a lot I think we can take from it. And thank you to everyone here as well who've joined us. If you do need to contact Mike, and I have that questionnaire that he sent me before as well. It's a great tool to complete and just run through it just to assess where you might be. That's a great tool. He's got his contacts. Mike, I'm sure you got your contact somewhere there. But certainly, thank you very much for that talk, and yeah, thank you everyone as well.